thing, the intro?
It'll ask you. Just go ahead and do it. Okay, there you go.
Welcome to Tech Charged, a Turn Down for Watt podcast live. I am one of your hosts, Chris Bowe from Bowe Family EV. With me today is Martin Meek from Martin Rebuilds. And
Thank you, Chris.
Usually with us, not pictured today, Jace Craft Miller, who's had a rough week. So
He has had a rough week. Or a rough 24 hours anyway, yeah.
It has been, yeah. So for those that don't know, Jace got in a little bit of an accident and truck took some pretty severe damage. He is doing okay, but a little bit sore. So he's not going to be with us today. And we are looking forward.
I'll be taking care of that tonight.
Yeah. It's always one of those things that reminds you, I early on got into an accident in my truck, and that's one of those things you play back in your head. And Martin, you make your living on people that get into accidents and you put the trucks back together. And those are things that Martin can rebuild, but people a lot more difficult, right? So that's one of those things where you just feel blessed and you feel grateful, and you just want to hear from your friend and know that he's doing well. So, hey, speaking of friends, we got our friends EV Geek chiming in, giving some love to Jace.
Yeah, Jace he'll be back. He's not severely damaged.
Yeah, it's going to be the $6 million man. We'll rebuild him bigger, stronger, faster. For those of you that are not old enough to remember that, Google search the $6 million man and check that out. But in the meantime, we do have a little bit of a pivot today. We've been pivoting a lot on Turn Down for Watt. We've been talking about the pivot. So we just we did another pivot today. We were going to have a great conversation with Robert from Ford. So he's traveling, going to Electrify Expo in Orlando. So any of you guys that are in Orlando, make sure you stop by the booth, say hello to, I don't know if Jake's going to be there, Electrify Jake. I think Emily, Charged Up Emily, should be there. And then I know Robert for sure is going to be there in Orlando. In fact, he landed today. So he was originally going to join us for a great conversation with Jason. We decided, for today, let's push that back to next Thursday. So we're going to try to circle back around next Thursday with Robert and see how Jace is feeling and kind of continue that. So we decided to do a pivot today on something that is a topic that I've seen a lot in the forums. I just saw one today, in fact, talking about different, why is my truck at this range? A lot of times it's coming out of the winter, it's winter weather. Sometimes it's wind. We just saw a great out of spec video with all the new Model Y, an old Model Y, a Model 3, and they were driving out in Colorado on the I-99, and a big impact of their range was the wind. So we'll talk through all these different factors, right? Towing, wind, tonneau covers. Someone today, just a little bit ago on the forums, was posting about folding their mirrors in, putting the tailgate down. I know, Martin, you had a trailer that you were towing. Size. Yeah, there's so much, right? There's so much that goes into range with an EV. They're so sensitive to it. So lots of things to touch on when it comes to that. Do you want to chime in there, Mark? I was waiting for you to chime in on your thoughts on the range. Martin also has been having some technical difficulties. I think he might have frozen up on us. Maybe there's that wind in Kansas, maybe affecting his internet. Oh, he's
man.
back. He's back.
Yeah, sorry. We're having internet problems here tonight, but hopefully this will be fixed now. So, yeah, we've had. I don't know if anybody has been following the news or whatever, but we've had wind in Kansas. Our wind Friday was 50 mile an hour sustained and up to 70 gusts. There was like 55 cars piled up out on 70 and a bunch of fatalities from the dust storm that came north. And then 2 days ago, we had another 45 to 50 mile an hour wind day. So it's been crazy wind here. And that definitely affects efficiency in a way. So, yeah, but tonight's about that, but we're going to talk a lot about little things that can affect your efficiency in a small way or a big way on how you use them, how you drive your truck, how you keep your tire pressures aired up. So, Chris, I know you had a good video a while back, and we had referenced it before about the tonneau cover. So that might be a good place to start, is talk about, does it matter if I have a tonneau cover or not, or up or down or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think, long story short, the answer turned out to be no. Long story long, the answer is no. It's still no.
Really.
Yeah.
Negligible test results depending on the drive and what semis you get caught behind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's always a challenge. I always envy folks that are able to get out there and do a range test in an area of the country that they've got some wide open roads. And that's not something I get to experience out here in California, where we get traffic all the time, which is one of those reasons that even with my standard range, I do pretty well with being able to get 270 miles out of my truck on a week. But in this case, what I did was I took my truck out to the Central Valley, out in about an hour and a half drive away from the Bay Area, up over the mountains that separate the Bay Area proper from the Silicon Valley from the Central Valley, which is where all the farmland is. And so, that's what I did. I drove it out there, and I went to Santa Nella Tesla Superchargers, and I drove it down to the world famous Harris Ranch Superchargers, and I just did a loop, and I tested it, with the tonneau cover on, and then I did that loop, and then I came back, and I logged everything. We talked before about apps, and I was using Car Scanner. So I got all, battery temperature, ambient temperature, pack voltage, all that kind of stuff. And then I did a loop with the tonneau cover off, and it made, absolutely no difference. If you have a chance, check out the video on Bow Family EV. I've got all the data.
That was great there. Somebody, wrote a marker on the thing, towing charger, please use the other one if you don't have a trailer.
What was so crazy about this is this picture you see here. I'll pause it on that part of the video. It's funny. I brought that up because some of my data was there, and just kind of showing that on the screen. But this is what's funny about this is Kyle Connor posted a picture of this somewhere in Colorado. This exact thing, this exact handwriting, like not only exact, but all the way down to the point where if you look at it right here, where it says Tesla charger, please use last, and then here it says thanks, like THX. This exact same person obviously has been towing from Colorado out to California, because like dead on to this exact thing where the thanks is at like a 45-degree angle down here in the corner and spelled THX. It's the exact same person. So,
all right, somebody knows somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the chargers.
Vandalism, I'm just saying.
Yeah. And I wish I had like a magic eraser or some kind of graffiti remover, but it was cool to have the pull through chargers, and I understand why they're doing it. But man, this charging location.
That right off.
Yeah. I think this is just one of those situations where obviously someone tows and got the harebrained idea that I'm gonna do this. I mean, I don't know. It'd be great if Tesla made some signs for it, maybe put it on top and said something like, reserved for towing or something for trailering. But there are so many.
It's hard to get people to do that. But yeah, if I pull in with not a trailer, I actually am actively thinking about which stall, EA, Tesla, whatever, which stall would be the the most accessible for a trailer guy if he pulled in. Like I won't take the install if I know somebody with the trailer is going to pull in if I'm not towing. And just from the transparent, or just from the side of, if I do pull in with the trailer, I want to get to that one that's on the end, so I'm not blocking anything else, and maybe not have to unhook, because unhooking is the worst. Not for me because I got it down to a science, but if you got a big trailer like our towing episode last week, hooking's the worst, and that doesn't really affect efficiency, but it does affect your trip time efficiency. So efficiency in a different way.
Yeah, it's something that I've been kind of pleasantly surprised as I've traveled up and down California. I've seen a number of Tesla superchargers that have the pull-throughs. And they do sometimes also kind of offset one. They put it forward a little bit where people, maybe it's not a pull-through, but you can bring your truck up and kind of nose it in and leave your trailer out there a bit. So there's been a couple different solutions I've seen them do. For those that want the data, I mean, you can jump here to, this is like the 17-minute mark of the video. And you can see kind of, the
really
the breakdown.
Gets into that.
Yeah. And I list the time on,
you kind of did a loop with both on and off. It's really clean. I mean, you can tell by that what the temperature was, how fast you were driving, all that stuff is equal. And it really, like you said, doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it made no difference at all. And it was interesting because in the video early on, I do a thing where I show, Mythbusters, and he explains how there's basically in the bed, like a bubble, an air bubble that's formed. And certainly at speed, it's kind of doesn't make a difference. And then what was interesting to me is also in the video, I've got a guy, there's a Ford engineer, and the Ford engineer is talking about the wind tunnel and how in the wind tunnel, it did make a difference to have a tonneau on. And so I don't know if that's a factor of the wind tunnel is just not a real world scenario, or if that's
a good, that's exactly right, Chris. That's a good example, because the wind tunnel will make a huge difference on like that, but it doesn't always make a huge difference on a percentage of efficiency. If you just look at visually through a wind tunnel, what does it do? And then you look at actual fluid flow, does that affect how much resistance that has to driving through the air? So exactly.
So I think it's always interesting to see these things. I saw somebody post just a little bit ago about they were driving and folding in their mirrors, and I've actually tried that before, and I didn't notice any difference. It seems like it would, because those mirrors are big old.
I think it's like this: if you add up 100 pennies, you're going to get $1. So all these things together, if you're really trying to maximize range and you need another 5 to 10%, you could probably put a tonneau cover on and fold in your mirrors and and make sure. The other thing is like air pressure. We want to get into that, because air pressure in tires in an EV is a big thing. It's a big thing. It can matter 10 to 15%, but it's the same way on a gas car too. EVs are just more impacted because of our smaller energy capacity. So like, I'm running Michelin's on my truck now, the Michelin MS2, the LTXs that are so popular with the EV rated tire. And I run them like 47, 48 PSI. I was reading an article the other day. A guy had actually put light truck tires on his, the Load Range E, that are rated for up to 80. And he was running 80, and he noticed a difference on those. However, the difference is going to be negated a little bit by a heavier tire. The 10-ply tires are considerably heavier. So, it's a trade-off. Maybe he was living on gravel roads and cranked him up to 80. I never liked 80 PSI tires in my 3/4 tons because they rode like crap. But, it's a trade-off again.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention when it comes to those little trade-offs, there was this video that Out of Spec did was really cool. And Kyle was going through mentioning, there's one of the Model Ys, and it has, I'll try to back this up a little bit. One of the Model Ys, you've got the brand new one, of course, which did fantastically. It's got the newest battery. There's no degradation on it. And then as he goes through, you're going to see another one of the Model Ys. It's got the license plate on the front. It's got aftermarket tires. It's got different rims. It doesn't have the Aero rims on it. And so that is all these little things, to your point, right? All these little pennies start to add up. If you look at the battery degradation, the license plate that's on the front, and there you see the license plate on the front of that one. The Aero wheels, all these things, even within the new Model Y, there is if you get the smaller tires with the aero wheels, you're going to have the better range and the softer ride. If you get the smaller sidewalls and you get the more sporty, cooler looking rims, you're gonna lose some of that. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the same thing with changing out the tires, on the Lightning, for example.
I have.
Right?
I have. I was going to pull it up here if I can get my internet to cooperate tonight. I bought an 18 F-150 that had 18-inch wheels off an Expedition on it with some Michelin Primacy tires, which should be a good EV rated tire. And I swapped those to the Lightning and did a 40-mile two-way. So, at 40 miles one way and 40 the other. And it was right at 10%. It made a difference. And I'll see if I can get a picture pulled up here. It made a difference. If you're needing another 10%, which, 260-mile range, 10% is another 26 miles. So it could make or break you on a trip. For me, I couldn't handle the look. It just didn't look good. So I was out. But it did definitely made a difference on range. So I don't know if it's rolling resistance, but it's also momentum. I'm using the wrong term here, but the centrifugal weight of that tire, the heavier they are, the more energy it takes to roll those. So, yeah,
and that's not uncommon because Tom Malogny puts on his all season winter tires. He was mentioning how when he was here, there's a common trip that he does in the Northeast, and normally he can make it there on a single charge. I think he can make it there. I can't remember if he can make it there on a single charge or there and back. I think he can make it there on a single charge, but because he had his winter tires on, he had to stop and charge before he got to his destination. So I know the tires make a difference for him. I know Jace has the all-terrains. I know F the Pump, Will puts some really cool. I really love his wheels, man. He's got these great blue wheels. I don't think that they are bead locked, but they look like they're bead locked. Maybe they are, but they are awesome.
Bead locked wheels.
Yeah, they look really cool. And on
the one truck out there, if you remember that new one that was lowered the first time, the white, maybe silver, and he put 24s on it, but he lowered it. So the lowered helps, and the wheels hurt it. It was kind of a wash. That guy really was talking to find out what actually affected efficiency, but I like a lowered look on Lightning.
Yeah, I think the lowered look was cool. I wish it had air suspension. I really, I'm kind of envious of that with the Cybertruck and with the Rivian, where they can go lower or they can rise up. I do know though that when you go lower and you lose some of that suspension, you lose some of the softness, and so you gain some efficiency. Right. But you're getting some harshness of ride. And so I'm not, for me, I'm not sure, just because I'm so practical and so value driven in terms of, part of why I bought the Lightning. Like, I don't know that I want the extra components of air suspension to fail. I don't know that I'm not, even though I'm going to get the efficiency out of it, I don't want the harshness of the ride. I really appreciate the softness of the Lightning ride. So everything is a trade-off though. If you're going to get some efficiency, just that ride height, they have that air dam. Maybe you could talk about that air dam that the Lightning has.
Yeah,
I've had early on I was getting stuck, and talk about that.
Well, it actually wasn't getting stuck. Then there are some people out there that it was getting stuck on the snow, and I even put out a video early on or a post on Facebook that talked about that air dam and squirting some WD-40 up in there, and that seemed to help mine go away. It turns out that was not accurate because you can't get to where the screw, it's a ball screw inside that moves that air dam up and down. Let me back up a little bit. There's two linear actuators on either side. They're electric driven motors that allow that air dam to come down below what you see under your bumper now. It helps diffuse some of the air around the truck rather than go under and be disturbed. Anytime you have disturbance, you're going to have bad airflow, bad efficiency. So what they do is they put that air dam on it to drop, and I think it's at I want to say 40 miles an hour. It could be a little less. Someone's going to correct me on that. And that drops down, and that lets the truck be more efficient. They have those on all the F-150s now, the active air dam, on the higher trim levels for sure. So this air dam, in the early days, you would get this active air dam fault. And what it was is there was too much amperage being drawn through that air dam for the limits that the Ford engineers had set in the software. And so it was drawing a little bit dirt, a little bit of resistance, drawing a little bit too much energy, and they go, oh, you got a fault. Well, since then they've pushed out an update for that, and it pretty much just went away. You don't see it too much more, people complaining about it. But I can tell you, about every time I pull codes, even on my latest 22 and 23 Lightning, I got an active air dam fault in the background. You just don't get to see it as a customer anymore. So yeah, it's still kind of there, but it's not nearly what it was. But I did find
somebody had dropped a comment. They wanted me to pull the active air dam off and check and see if it would make any, like, what difference it would make in range. Me and you are a little bit wired differently that way. You could just get in there and probably pull that air dam off really quick. And for me, I'm like, I don't like taking my truck apart.
It's not bad. It's 4 bolts on either side, but it's on the back side of the bumper. You'd have to kind of lay on your head and crawl underneath there. So here's my 22 with those 18-inch Expedition wheels. And boy, did it just looks, of course, the LEDs don't take a good picture. We all have seen the strobing LEDs online, so ignore that. But it just doesn't have a good look to it to me. I didn't care for it at all. But if I really needed a little extra on a longer trip, a lowering suspension would probably give me, I'm going to say, up to 20%. I know Mitch Medley up in Kansas City had a truck that he had lowered, and it helped him on his range in the summer, just because you don't have the disturbance. And he towed with his like that a lot. So I know that's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you look at, if you could, two extremes, right? The Lightning is probably one of the least efficient vehicles out there. The Silverado, obviously, with its big heavy batteries. The Hummer is another one, but the Lightning's right up there in terms of least efficient vehicles on the road for an EV. And then you've got the other extreme, which is the Model 3, and that Tesla Model 3 that was they just kind of put it in there as a comparison. I like when Alex Spec does that. You've got the new Model Y, you've got a recent Model Y, you've got a little bit older Model Y with some miles on it. And then you've got the Model 3, which that thing, man, was still getting like 4 miles per kilowatt hour, even with 50-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah. And it goes so much further. It has such aero on it. And people talk about the, what's the like the ratio that they use for aero? You know what I'm talking about on that?
Oh, it has to do with the coefficient of friction, coefficient of drag. Wind resistance.
But it's not just the coefficient. A lot of people will quote that. That's like the most common thing. Well, it's got a coefficient of drag of X, and they'll tell you what it is. But it's not just that. It's that plus frontal surface area. So
yes, that plays into that.
Yes. Yeah. So these big, heavy.
If you look at the wind tunnel results on these cars, like the Aptera has a coefficient of drag that's like better, almost as good as an F1 car, and that's what we were talking about before, because it's supposed to get 10 miles per kilowatt hour on an Aptera. So if you talk about efficiency, that thing is only efficient. The design looks like a dolphin with 3 wheels, So this FYI, if anybody's curious, if you take this is a truck we built at the shop, it's an 18 or 19 F-150, and you put the Lightning wheels on that. So I just swapped them that day to see, I always love the Lightning wheel on a Lightning, but I'm not sure I love it on an F-150. So
now, did you do any mileage testing on that to see if it made a difference on a gas vehicle? Because that would be pretty funny.
I didn't on this truck because those are an aero wheel. It probably would make a little difference. I was more concerned about the Lightning and the range there, just because this truck has a 36-gallon tank. It has like a 600 and some mile range anyway, and so I didn't care. I think that's why you see a lot of people who level these. This truck's been leveled, and you put different wheels on, and it'll make a difference a little bit. But with a 36-gallon tank, it's going to make a few dollars difference at the pump. It's not going to be huge.
Yeah, so I think obviously the big factors, if we were to go down the factors of range, would you put, temperature has got to be temperature or wind? Which one's going to be your number one?
I think wind is number one, and it depends on and again, this is all dynamic. It depends on the speed of the wind. If you're in a 10-mile-an-hour wind, the temperature is going to have a bigger impact if it's like 30 degrees versus 80. But I have always said on all cars, but an EV, again, with our small fuel storage, wind is the worst. And wind comes in 2 ways. It's towing with wind resistance, or headwinds, or in worst case scenario, both.
Yeah,
Because you get
and with the
Go ahead.
wind, at least there's an opportunity for the wind to help you. Like on my trip to Vegas, I had a lot of help with the wind, and I got some incredible efficiency. EV Geek chiming in with noticed a big difference when I had a headwind.
Did you see my post last week when I was driving in that 55-mile-an-hour wind for a few miles?
So like 0.8 or something you were getting?
Well, no, when I was just driving the truck home from work, I got, and like 55-mile-an-hour headwinds at 70, I was getting like 1.2. And that's a 2.1, 2.0 trip. And I mean, that's just, I do that same drive every single day, and those winds are brutal.
So I think that's your top three. It's going to be wind, it's going to be temperature, and you start to get below, and then 30s and below, I think, are when you really see it impact. And then the towing. You know, when you're which towing is related to the wind, because you have a giant wind sail. Really, it's not the weight as much as it is the wind. So I guess that's kind of that's kind of a 1B.
You would think not. I was going to bring that up for some of the I'm working on a video, will be out hopefully in the next couple of days, about the trip that we took. We did a 370 mile per trip, not mile per hour. That'd be a little fast. A little 370 mile trip up north of Wichita, Kansas. So it was 5 hours one way, or 4 hours one way and 4 hours back, plus charging. And I pulled a 10-foot trailer, and I'll put up a picture here of it, that we pulled up there. And on the way up from work to the first turnoff to go back west, this trailer, this trying to pop up, my internet's slow. This trailer was not very tall, but it has about a 3-foot, wire mesh gate on the back. And I was getting like 1.1 to 1.2 at best at 70 miles an hour. 68, 69 miles an hour, but I had the cruise set on both directions. So I ran 20 miles with the trailer with the gate up, and then we turned west. I had a tailwind pushing me up. So tailwind, 12 mile an hour behind me. And then when I went crossways west, I had a crosswind. Well, I got out of the trailer, or out of the truck, and I decided to lay this gate down, because you can just pop this little bracket off. This gate will lay down against the trailer. And it went from 1.1-ish to 1.4 in the next 20 miles just by laying that gate down. And this trailer, keep in mind, the truck is up above this bar, and the trailer is not much wider than the truck. So there's not a lot of going on there, but there is air disturbance as that trailer comes off the back of the air. Wind comes off the back of the trailer. So it really is still about wind. And this trailer is pretty light. It doesn't weigh a whole lot. I'd say 1,000, 1,200 pounds. It's not super heavy, but it does make a difference. So wind disturbance, not just headwind.
It's got all the holes, and it's a grate of a tail on it. So it's not like it's a solid surface either. And it still makes a pretty substantial difference there.
It does, but still, yet I've had gates that are 4 foot tall, and they pull like a wind sail. I have a little 5x10 trailer that does the same thing, and even behind a gas truck, you really feel it bucking the wind and pulling the wind. But it made a huge difference. It was interesting because once I got there, we put the lawnmower that I was going to pick up on that trailer and pull back at like 1.3, 1.4 with the lawnmower on, which you think would be as tall as that gate and have the impact that gate did, but again, same kind of day, all the things being equal, that gate being up was a killer. So yeah, resistance of sorts. So there's things like, I've always thought, I don't know if you've got them on your truck, these the factory Ford mud flaps.
I don't. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people put those on.
Trucks. Yeah. I don't know if it makes a difference. I've thought about taking them off and doing a range test with them, like 40 miles or so with them on and off. Because I hear other guys, like I know Patrick has talked about his truck in Florida at 70 miles an hour, consistently got 2.3 to 2.4. It was a Lariat standard range. He converted to an extended range. I don't think he had the mud flaps. And if I get 2.0, I am thrilled, with my truck.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I'm not really off-roading at all. I don't have any snow. I don't have any salt. I don't have any of that kind of stuff. The roads aren't perfect, but they're not severe. So I've always kind of just not bothered putting the mud flaps on, and kind of figured, I just assumed that it can't be helpful having those on there.
they're directly behind the tires. So it shouldn't make a huge impact, but I feel like it does. And I have tested that. I'd like for somebody to come back and do that. If I don't, is to take the mud flap, do a test, same day, same conditions, do a loop, then put them on and do it again. And let's see what we get out of those, because they do. I feel like they're going to make a difference. I don't know why both of the extended range Lariats that are identical trucks have had the same 1.9 to 2.0 efficiency at 70 on a normal day. Why they're different, but there is a difference. So, and you know, we get some snow and stuff here, but I don't drive my truck that much in that stuff. That's not why I put them on. I put them on just to keep the road junk that you get from slinging down the side of the truck, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too, where we have all these different ideas, and you almost have to test each and every single one, and you'd have to test it on each and every single vehicle, because the engineers have gotten so good with their modeling before they ever even actually make one of these vehicles. And it's not even wind tunnels as much anymore as it's computer models, and they have designed these things. And you see a lot of these companies now, if you look at like the back of the Lucid Gravity, or if you look at even the back of the new Model Y, I should try to pull up a picture of that. The back of the new Model Y has some aero on the hatch, and even on the front. On the front, there are these little wind kind of slits on the left and the right now for aero. And I know another example is why am I trying to blank on it? The VinFast VF8. Or VF9, sorry, the VF9, the hood has this kind of cool, almost ram air scoop looking thing that they do aero with. So they started to design these things in, or like with the bed of the Lightning, where it is designed at speed to cause a little air bubble. And so sometimes people think that they're adding on, you know, I'm going to add a spoiler, and it actually hurts your aerodynamics when you start adding pieces to your truck, because it's been designed not to have it. It could, yeah.
And it doesn't mean that Ford spent, you know, billions of dollars to getting it perfect. I mean, it's a flying brick that's, you know, 450, 500 watt air per mile, or 2.0 mile per kilowatt hour. I know the aero, like the spoilers are really good because they help create downforce on the back of the car. That's why you see them on the race cars. You know, you plant the back of that car and you get more downforce. So at higher speeds, it's a lot more stable. But yeah, they don't necessarily help. They don't necessarily hurt on certain models. I've seen some wind tunnel testing where I've looked at that and thought, oh, well, that actually helped that car, because it extended that ball that you get behind the car of air, extended it further back and didn't disturb it as much. So you got less resistance, less vacuum effect, like he was talking about in your video earlier.
I remember one of the cooler things that I learned from Ford when we got to travel up there to Detroit and meet some of the engineers. One of the questions that a lot of people had asked, as far as the Mustang Mach-E, it's got that odd kind of handle, you know, where you grab it, it kind of sticks out and protrudes from the door. It's not flush. So you press that button and it's got that little piece, almost like an L bracket, that sticks out of it. And it always seemed odd. It's like, why, you know, that can't be good for aero. And the engineer said they actually designed it in a place where the mirror itself, the mirror is already there. And that mirror is going to move the air around it in such a way that it actually goes around that piece, and it has no impact to aerodynamic properties because of the way the air comes over and around the mirrors. And so that's the kind of detail that they get into in terms of how they design the shape of the mirrors, can then have an effect later on down at the side of the vehicle.
We actually added a pair of those on the back of the Mustang, because I feel like the back of the Mustang is missing that. You know, there's not anything to get a hold of. You push the button and wait for the door open. You got to grab the edge of the door. So you can pick those up on Amazon cheap, but I added those to the rear, and, you know, no more than we drive, and we're not trying to push it to the absolute maximum efficiency. It's a GT Performance Edition with 20-inch tires. You're not going to get efficiency out of that one anyway. So we added those because it was missing it. To me, that should have happened from the factory.
It does feel weird when you put your finger in there. You almost feel like, you know, there's a little plunger. It's not going to let you crush your hand. Cybertruck is similar. You know, you got to put your hand in there, and you're like, it just feels wrong. You spend your whole life telling your kids to watch your fingers. And anybody who's had their fingers slammed into a 1970s Pontiac, like I have, you tend to learn that lesson. But now they've designed those much better. But it does seem weird that there's not something there to grab. EV I remember his video talking about the carbon fiber spoilers, and it's funny because watch that video. And a buddy of mine that's got a Model Y works with me. We did the same thing. We took and watched that video, and then we put a carbon fiber spoiler on the back of his, and it was more for aesthetics. It just looked cooler. Carbon fiber is just a fun thing to play with and to add accessories to, but he didn't see any increase in efficiency or range either. And I gather really with these spoilers that it's just kind of an aesthetic look. And if you were to get at a high enough speed, it would give you some downforce and some better track performance more than anything. But yeah, that was a good video to watch. Yeah. Just for looks. That's the reason that he did it as well. So some of those things people think are going to have an arrow.
Right. It is. And even the Mach-E has an arrow that you can put on the back if you have one of those. But like the rear door, this is a great example. There's nothing back on that rear door, and you add that. It just gives you something to get a hold of. I didn't like it. Now the way it's $26. I mean, you're not out much, but this one doesn't feel super. There's one screw on the back, just like there is on the front, and two-sided tape down to the trim, so you can clean it up pretty good. But it does help. I mean, as far as that goes. Now, I know we're getting off base here. This is not really talking about efficiency, but it won't hurt the efficiency, is what we're at. Most of these things most of the things you can do to your car are not going to kill the efficiency anyway. But like again, I said earlier, if you add non-EV rated tires and we can talk about EV rated tires, because some EV rated tires are just, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. They're not EV rated tires. They have that foam inside for noise dampening, so they'll be quieter. But that doesn't necessarily by itself mean the tires are going to be more efficient. It has to do with the rolling resistance of the tire, the compound of the tread, the distance of the tread itself, and then those little grooves between the tread, how many of those. There's technical terms for that, and I'm not going to try to quote them because I can't remember them, but about that makes those tires more efficient or not. And I have run on the Lightning personally 3 different tires. The Hankook factory tire that they come with, a lot of Lightnings had that Hankook on the all-terrain, or what is that, the all-terrain, Chris? Am I saying that right? Yeah. And then there's the general grabbers, and I've run those. I guess I've run 4 now because of these Michelins. And then I actually am a huge Atturo fan, Atturo. We've had those on a lot of stuff. I keep them on all my trailers, all my stuff. No difference in range on any of those 3 tires. They all performed exactly the same. The Michelins, I thought were going to be a bigger deal because they're specifically EV rated. You hear about them everywhere. Every other post on tires on there is, buy the Michelin LTX MS2s. I remember when they were first coming out, I was even interested. I noticed 0 difference range from the Hankooks to the Generals to the Michelins. No difference at all. In fact, my Michelins, I bought them on Marketplace for $400 off of a 24 takeoff truck. They have a little bit more noise to understand that. They have a little bit more noise coming from Michelin than the other two, which is interesting. So, yeah, that's a good point.
I think when it comes to the tires, the big thing that I've noticed is it's more about the size. That if you're going with the 18-inch, yes, you're going to get better than the 20, and if you go with the 20, you're going to get better than the 22. And
the width means rolling resistance, means wider, more contact patch. You're exactly right, Chris. The size of your tires, if you can, like I showed you on that Lightning, if you can drop down to an 18 with a little skinnier tire that has you can air the tire up a little more, you have less rolling resistance, it'll make a difference. Like I said, I saw 10% out of those 18s, and none of the other 20s were a difference. But he's right. This foam doesn't really do anything. It's just for a dampener. In fact, that foam comes loose on the inside. You get an out of balance condition because that foam will roll up in a ball inside there, and then it gets worse range, so that it actually hurts.
Yeah, I've seen people post about that. I was trying to pull somewhere. I did. Buddy of mine that used to work with me at FedEx, he now manages a huge tire distribution center. And they get them all in, and then they go out to different shops and different big tire companies, including their supplier for Tesla. And I got to see some of those foam tires that Tesla brings in, and they talk about that they will get dislodge, that foam will come out, and it's they're warranted and whatnot, and they'll swap them out when that happens. And especially if there's some tires that have had a lot of track time, I guess the heat, when they heat them up on the track, and they do a couple different Tesla Corsica runs out here in the Central Valley, and they do track these cars, and if you put those tires, they're not really rated for high speed necessarily, they're not rated for high heat, and so if you put a lot of pressure and stress on them, those foam pieces can fall out. They're meant for your
glued in.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
It's literally rubber cement, and I'm putting that very simply, but it's literally just rubber cement on those foam. The other thing about the foam that happens is when you have a flat tire, if you have a nail go through your tire, it's nearly impossible to pull that up, repair it, put it back down, and have it hold. So I'm not a foam tire fan. I don't want to put those in anything. We actually have a tire distributorship here at the shop, and we have a tire machine and balancer that we do kind of some local stuff. I don't advertise. I don't want all that business. That's a mess. But we do quite a bit of tire swapping and trials here. Went from a set of well-known type tires on the Tesla Model 3 that my daughter has, and just picked up the cheapest tire that simpletire.com. Shout out to those guys. I have a distributorship with them. They're awesome. Those tires were like Arroyos, an off-brand you hadn't heard of. And we've been running them on cars for 2 years now and not had any trouble. I'm a big Atturo fan. Atturo is actually based in like Cincinnati or something, but they're overseas made. But the Arroyo was just an off-brand. She's complained about her range. I haven't done enough studies to say that it's the tire, but it's not. The longer the tire is rated to go, the harder the rubber compound is. So the less rolling resistance you should have. So like a race tire, that's got a really sticky tire, it's not going to be very efficient. So if you're looking for a tire and they got an 80,000 mile range, that means they're expecting those tires to last longer, to be a harder compound. But they might be a little more noisy at that. I know we have had a lot of folks on the Lightnings put the new is it the Toyo? Is it Toyo, the new EV rated kind of off-road tire, and noise was really good on those.
Yeah, I think that's the best bet, is to go to the forums and see the people that are kind of the guinea pigs, who's out there trying the different tires. What are they seeing on impact, and what matters to you? Is the sound more important? I really appreciate the quietness and the smoothness of the truck, and so for me, I value that. I want the soft ride. I want the quiet ride. If I can keep it. But
a lot of guys, they just want the look. The look is what and that's why I like to pull those 18s. If you lots of leveled trucks, leveling will hurt your range a little bit. You level that truck to where it's level, it's going to cost you 5 to 10% depending on your style of driving. And speaking of style of driving, you drive your truck like a Corvette should be driven, and you're going to get a lot less range. So, there's always that factor.
Yeah. Shout out Jesse Hensley, our host on our other podcast, man. He drives it that way. I think a little bit more than I do, certainly.
I do at times. My first set of tires last 37,000 miles, and the outsides were worn off. And I don't corner really hard, but they just were in it. And everybody says, well, if your outsides are wearing off, you're under pressured. But I had them at 45 PSI. 50 was max rated pressure on those Hancooks. But I saw the same exact thing happening on a Power Boost tire, same tire on a Power Boost. And the truck weighs less. Outside the edges were worn off. We've put about 20,000 miles on these Michelin so far, and they're flat. There's no edge wear at all, which I'm thinking might be the difference in the tire. I think the Enduros will end up being the same way. I've sold those to a local guy in his pickup, and they're wearing really well too. So that's going to be a time will tell. But price doesn't necessarily mean better on tires on EV range. So you kind of have to, like you said, Chris, do your research, look at what other guys have done, see what kind of impact they have. I know Jace would talk about. He does a lot of all-terrain tires up there, and Jace would talk about how it hurt him a little bit on some. They're better on others. And when he comes back, we can pick his brain a little bit on that. But yeah, so tires, that's another one. That's probably I would say 5th or 6th down the list for efficiency impact.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of that comes down to the look. I love when you've got those trucks that have the tires that are just a little bit wider than the fender flare is, and the tires just kind of stick out a little bit. And there is just something really cool about that traditional kind of race suspension, fat tires that stick out a little bit like Bigfoot used to back in the day. Not quite that exaggerated, obviously, but there's some cool looking wheels.
Yeah, we don't want these rubber band wheels on 12-inch wide Super Duties that are lifted tall that the tire's completely outside the fender well.
Yeah. But all that, every single bit of that's going to impact it. And then, I'm kind of looking forward now. We're getting closer to spring, and we're going to get away from those. So we see regularly, people joke about in October, you get the pumpkin spice. It's pumpkin spice season. It's also when you're starting to get to where now you're starting to get some colder weather in some places. And then you get into November, December, and then December through February, like without fail, just post after post about, is this right? Is this range right? And
or these guys that just bought their truck in those times and went, I just bought this truck. It's rated for 320 miles. Why am I getting 170? Well, they live in Michigan and it's 30,
Yeah, you're out there with, one that's kind of mixed use rating of city and highway. You've been driving your commute, 70 miles a day and 12-degree weather, and your truck is not going to get it. And that's the thing is, though, that's a real thing that we have to confront and figure out how we communicate. And popular culture, there's just not a lot of EVs in popular culture. They don't talk about it. We need an EV show, man. We need a show like Dukes of Hazzard, like Knight Rider. We need the car to be the star, and it needs to be an EV car. It needs to be incorporated in to kind of slowly get people to understand. Someone needs to do this.
I'm with you. I think NHRA has drag racing with electric dragsters now, but there's no we just talked about this today at lunch. There's no exhilarating thrill. You have to have all 5 senses for something to be fun. I got to be honest, Chris, I love my truck. I miss my Shelby GT500 because it gives me all 5 of those senses. I can burn the tires so I can smell it. I've got the sound, I've got the feel, the noise, all of that comes in. But every day for living with it, I want it quiet. I don't want to listen to the truck. And that's the thing with, when you start adding tires, you're going to hear them. You start lifting it, you're going to have more air rushing under it. You start adding the vent visors or the bug deflector like the old man used to do on the front grille. That'll make a difference on aerodynamics. There's just so many little things that can really affect it. We talked about the cold being up north, and then we're headed back to warmer temperatures. We should talk about why, when they rate these trucks at 320 miles on an extended range, and was it 240 on a standard range? Why is
it was
that
originally 230. Originally
Yeah.
It was 230. Now it's up to 240. And, there's those EPA formulas. And I don't know why they do this either with electric, because if you go and you buy I've mentioned a few times that I had the STX that Ford gave me and was playing around with that. And it gave a city rating and a highway rating. And I'm not sure why they didn't do that for electric, because there is very clearly a dramatic difference between when you're driving.
It's exactly opposite too.
It is. Yes.
City highway in the city, you're going to get crap mileage. You're going to get your best mileage on an ICE vehicle. And it absolutely flips on an EV because of the wind resistance, because, the more energy you expel, the more you're going to burn. And that's exactly. So I don't know. You're right, Chris. Why don't they do that? Because we know, you and I in the local community of electric vehicle drivers know that 60% city, 40% highway is how the EPA rated those vehicles at 320 or respectively 240 on a standard range. They should have just said highway miles is this, city miles is this. But what's highway? Your highway is different from Texas highway, different from my highway. So
I literally, people ask me, I do a lot of EV events in the Bay Area. There's a nonprofit group out here called Actera, not to be confused with Aptera, easy to confuse the two. But Actera is a nonprofit that talks about sustainability and EVs. And I've done their car shows and their EV meetups and stuff for a long time. Sophie, who does the NorCal Mach-E Club, she's been a guest on the EV Geek podcast. She's an awesome partner. The two of us have done a lot of different shows, and it's probably the number one question. It's right there with cost. How much did it cost you, and what's your range? And you can never give a straight answer on the range, which always feels, I've never found a good, clean way to answer the question, because it almost feels like there's no way to answer it honestly without putting someone on their heels. Because, you know, it's like when I talk to somebody at work and I ask them a question and they don't just give me a simple yes or no, and you're like, oh, something suspicious here. Or, you know, your ears perk up, you know, when you have to start making excuses or start trying to overly explain. But I have yet to find an elegant way. And I think the thing you said earlier is one of my go-tos. I tell them it's the opposite of gas. On gas, you're getting way better on your highway, and you're getting really bad in stop and go around town. It's the complete opposite. And then I go into my explanation, and that's about as close as I've come to being able to explain it.
Yeah, and I do that too. People ask me the same. I get 3 questions. How much did it cost? How far can you go? How long does it take to charge? I mean, you get those questions, those 3 every time, and I've answered them a million times. And I just tell guys, if somebody asks me how far can you go, I just say 260 miles. Because it's 2.0 at 70. They don't need to know. And in winter, I get less. And halfway summer dry, I just say 260. You know, that's a clean, even number. And I think most Tesla drivers, Mach-E drivers, EV9, ID4, everybody kind of knows once you drive it for 20,000 miles what the range is on your car. I mean, it says it right on the dash, and normally pretty close. The weird thing about a Lightning is when you crawl in it, it's going to tell you 260, and you don't get that. And I hear this about Tesla all the time. As a crawling a Tesla, we own 2 of them, and it gives me a number on the dash, and I no more get that than a man on the moon. It's just not accurate. But so why does the Lightning catch so much crap about it? I think because we're coming from F-150 drivers, a lot of us, not all of them, and they're, whatever the number is pretty close.
Yeah, and I've said this before on the video. I made the video with it when I had the STX, because it blew me away. I mean, my last gas truck was a 2008 F-150 Lariat. It got about 15 miles to the gallon. And I was driving a lot like I am today. It's a lot of commute traffic, a lot of city driving, a lot of around town in the suburbs. And so its best efficiency was never going to be seen by me. So I'm getting 14, 15 miles a gallon on average. And I didn't have the really big tank either. So, you know, I was in that 300-mile range or whatever. So no big deal. With my Lightning, I get about 270. And I get it, like, you know, and that's the standard range. And that's rated, like you said, at 240. I'm outpacing that because, you know, my traffic patterns here are the same kind of four cities. It takes me 30 minutes to drive 10 miles. And I don't see a lot.
And even if customer for an EV,
100%
customer.
Yep. But then when I take
this solar, you know, efficiency, you want to talk about efficiency. You want to be efficient? Put some solar on your house and let it charge your truck. Now you're efficient.
Yeah, now it's like free energy, you know, and we'll get into that another day. The argument, but it's I mean, obviously you have to put the initial investment in, but like, you know, my panel's paid for itself after 7 years, so it's all free now. But that's different topic for a different day. But yeah,
you're exactly right though, Chris. You running your 30 minutes and 10 miles. That's perfect, man. I mean, you're talking about the exact opposite of your 5.4 and your 08, and this truck, other than the cost up front, way more fitting of your drive. Now for me, I drive through town about 5 miles and I've got about 3 miles of 70 miles an hour. I usually get in the summer about 2.1 to 2.2 going to work with the average. In the winter, that drops to about 1.6 because I'm running that heater full bore in the winter. At first off, all heated seats, I don't care anything about range. And that's the thing people talk about. How bad I've heard the EVs are I see all those Teslas in Chicago that froze to nothing. You know, you hear the negativity. Here's the reality of it, guys. Nobody gives a crap about range when you're driving it every day. Nobody cares because nobody drives it every day on a normal commute. The average person, you know, some people are going to drive 180 miles a day, and you do care, but the average is like 40 to 50 miles. Is that right for a commute to work?
Yeah, it's just
max
like
average.
Somewhere less than that. I think it's like 35, but yeah, somewhere in that 30 to 40
nobody
mile.
At 40 miles a day, nobody gives a crap. I don't care. I don't even plug my truck in. Half the time I'll get down to 30, 40%. I just run it the next day, and I know I'll have enough to get to work and back, and it never crosses my mind. The only time we get to talk about efficiency and range is really on trips, you know, and that's why a lot of guys lift their trucks. They add Tonneaus and they add wheels and they do all this stuff because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think Ford got that part right recently when they started talking about the Ford Power Promise and they started doing the "we'll install your charger at home." The guys over
Yep.
at Electrify Expo, which we'll be able to talk to Robert next week, hopefully, about the Orlando Electrify Expo that kind of kicks off their season, and they have an Electrify Expo up here in the Bay Area that I've gone to every year, and they're really great. My truck is usually in the show off area there. And their organizers have mentioned that they have pivoted as well. I think slowly the industry is realizing the marketing for that needs to be to the homeowner. Find the homeowners, the people that live in the single family suburban homes that are commuting. Those are your low hanging fruit EV owners. And if you want an EV, you can make it work. If you've got charging at home, if you've got charging at work, you can make it work if you live in an apartment. If you really want to, like strategically going to grocery stores, movie theaters, doing, that was a big thing with VW and a lot of companies. Even Ford, when we bought ours, we got free Electrify America. Not as much as VW, but that was very common early on that they would give away free charging. That was the strategy, right? Like, if we're going to put you in an EV and you're not going to have to pay for charging for the first 3 years. And so people are thinking about, especially back then, the gas bills, and like, these gas bills are so high, I'm going to have to pay. But then if you had,
I'm sure glad you brought that up, Chris. We should really get into that a little more. And here's why. I have 2 Model S's sitting here right now. They're both free supercharging for life.
Yep.
Do you know how much I would use that?
None.
You know how much I would use that? None. Because I'm not going to daily sit for 30, 50 minutes supercharger. It's not going to happen. I want to do it at home. So I think you're exactly right. If you live in an apartment, there are options. And it's becoming more and more available that landlords and things like that are open to this. This is starting to become a bigger market. I don't know if you saw the episode, but they make now that go-between on the meter of your house. And not all states have approved this, not all electric utilities have approved it, but it goes between the meter and the meter block. And it's basically a tap. Still with you, or did I lose you completely?
You froze up a little bit there. You were saying how it was attached.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you're locked up a little bit.
But so they got that little meter attachment that goes in, allows you to put those chargers in places where you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And really, I know Tom dropped a video today on like a $200 charger, 40 amp, super cheap, and he did a review on it. That there's ways to get a charger at your house, and really that's the bottom line. I spend more time charging at home as much as we've traveled than anywhere else by far.
Yeah, if you can charge at home or at work, but certainly at home, because jobs do change. If you have the ability to charge at home, or even tell somebody you're renting a home from, hey, I'll pay a couple $100 to put the charger in, and I'll leave it with you. If you're going to stay there for a while.
It's funny. My brother-in-law bought my 22 Lightning and went to Texas, and he works at a hospital, and they have 30 charge point chargers. They're like 6.6 kilowatts there.
Yep.
He's had the truck since Thanksgiving. He's never put a charger in his house. They charge him 4 cents a kilowatt hour to charge it at work. He said, I don't ever want to put a charger at my house for daily use. He'll use his mobile charger when he needs to, but it's so cheap at home. There's no reason to put it in there.
ChargePoint has made their living doing that. Putting when my wife had a surgery once, I pulled up and there was ChargePoint chargers there. The San Francisco Zoo has ChargePoint chargers there. The San Francisco Airport, ChargePoint chargers, and sometimes they're free. Like the San Francisco Airport is free. And you plug it in, they're free. They have a bunch of solar panels over the awnings on the parking garage, and so those so cool. There's ways for that. And it's funny because you mentioned Chicago, and one of the big problems with Chicago was this was where all of the Uber and Lyft drivers were part of that program, where they got these cars and got really great lease rates, or really great, they didn't have to buy the cars. But a lot of them, I lived in Chicago for a couple of years in the 90s. And when I moved from California to Chicago, the first thing I did was I got rid of my car. I had this Ford Escort GT, little spoiler on the back, little sporty 90s. It was a fun little car. It was the first car I ever bought brand new. Like, we've lost Martin. I'll just keep talking until he comes back. but yeah, that when I moved out to Chicago, I sold the car because it was going to cost me as much money to park and to pay for the parking of my car, both at work and at home. It was going to cost me just as much money as my rent. And so those people that are living in Chicago are living in buildings that it costs them money to park their car. And so a lot of times they're leaving their car outside and not in a parking garage. And it's cold soaking the battery. It's cold soaking the car. And then they go to try to plug that thing in and it's not charging right. And there's big lines. There's Martin. Martin, you missed my whole great story.
No, Kansas internet, man.
Yeah, but it's I was just telling about how you're talking about Chicago, and when I moved from California to Chicago, I sold my Ford Escort GT because it was going to cost. If I parked it at the parking garage at my apartment and I parked it at the parking garage at work, it was going to cost me as much to pay for parking as it was for my rent. And so those people in Chicago are leaving their cars out in the cold soaking. And then they're trying to do Uber and Lyft, and they've been out all night, and they're just not going to charge right. And so that was just a horrible scenario, all the way around for the batteries, for the chargers, for those cars being outside. That is just not the ideal circumstance. And so there's plenty of areas, a lot of our friends out in Canada who have incredible cold weather. Norway has incredible cold weather, but they make it work if they're putting it in a garage. If they're able to precondition the cabin, they've got the heat pump now.
Yeah, or at least keep it plugged in.
Yep. Yeah. And Tom Logney did that video. Remember he left it out and left the truck on.
I do. I tried that. I've made a video recently trying that. It didn't make any difference if you're not plugged in, but leaving it on and leaving it plugged in is a huge benefit.
Yeah. But you're going to use that energy. And so it all comes down to, am I going to use the energy from shore power and then have more energy available for my range? But what's the point of that if I'm only going 30 or 40 miles? There's no point to it.
Right. I don't precondition. I don't know about you, Chris. But I don't precondition my truck for daily use if it's not cold outside.
No, I don't even do if it is cold outside. I mean, I precondition the cabin just so that I go out there and I'm not freezing cold, but freezing cold, California cold, which is, doesn't get really below 35. My coldest days are, typically 38, 39, 41, 42. Those are my, I get a little bit of frost. I get some layered. The one time I was, you and Jason and Ben Westby were out there posting your snow pictures. And I was like, what kind of medieval black magic is this? And I had just a thin layer of frost on my car. And I just thought it was funny to put.
And those will affect efficiency. But once again, I couldn't care less about my 13-mile one-way trip. For efficiency, the truck has such a big battery, it doesn't matter. Unless I'm trying to do something after work. If it's a Friday night, I'm trying to get to work. I know I want to be able to go to Tulsa, and we're going to have a 160-mile round trip after that work trip. I'll do a little bit more to make sure it's preconditioned. Maybe we don't have any chargers at my work that I can plug into, but if it's super cold, I know I'm just going to have to eat that, and I'll fast charge somewhere along the way, because 10 minutes of fast charge will take up for the efficiency difference that you have. It warms the battery back up. It also helps the efficiency of the truck when you warm the battery up at a fast charger. Even if you don't precondition, 10 or 15 minutes there will bump you back up in miles to where you were pre-cold weather.
And the Ford Lightning Pack, I know this isn't the case for the Mach-E or the Tesla as much. The Ford Lightning Pack does better than most when it comes to the cold weather in terms of charging curve. It always impacts it, but it's not as dramatic as what you see with some of the Tesla vehicles and the Mustang Mach-E. It's much more an exaggerated decline of the charging speed. And so, I get to avoid a lot of that being in California. And I think that is something that we repeatedly see. And
Texas, Alabama, Florida, all those guys are kind of like you, their range isn't affected as much, and they're going to get closer to that EPA rating on a daily basis. But, the main thing to take away from this is just drive your truck. Don't worry about it unless you're going on a trip. Just do your thing. It's not going to hurt the battery, really, unless you're in Canada where it's going to freeze it solid every night. I would suggest plugging it in. When we were 0 degrees here for a couple of weeks, I kept my truck plugged in, and I was trying to put it in the garage to try to keep, from pulling too much energy from the grid. But it's not a huge amount. We're talking a few kilowatts. Your dryer is going to pull more energy than the truck is when it's just keeping the battery warm.
Yeah, and I tell you what, there's two videos that I still want to make. One of them I'm going to go right back to that same place I did the tonneau cover test, which was Santa Nella to Harris Ranch, and that's a really good cycle. That's a really good, really good range place at 70 miles an hour in my truck that allows me to go from somewhere in the teens, 10, 14%, up to 80, hit the road, do the loop, come back, and still be in the teens somewhere. So I'm not having to spend a whole lot of time at the supercharger. And what I want to do next is I really want to test this idea, because the tonneau cover was the big one that I would see a lot. Tonneau cover is going to save me some range. I'm going to add the tonneau cover. I'm like, okay, no, it doesn't do anything. The other big one, and I suspect it'll be a similar result, I think you know where I'm going with this, is a lot of arguments, or not arguments, maybe not the right word, but a lot of people talking about one pedal. Well, if I take one pedal off and then I let off the accelerator, I can coast. I can coast, especially if it's downhill and I'm getting that free energy. And then, but regen is really great for around town. But when I'm on the highway, I go into sport mode, and I haven't used sport mode a lot, but I believe sport mode does it reduce regen, or does it just take off the one pedal altogether so you can coast?
No,
I don't know if that's default.
You can leave it on.
Okay.
I've done that like you, Chris, a lot. And there's guys that live by one pedal drive off, sport mode on. You still get some regen in sport mode, but not as aggressive as you would in normal. And they'll take it off and they swear by it. I've tried it both ways. I am not seeing a significant difference doing that.
Yeah, and I suspect that's how it will turn out. But that's half the fun. Is, you know what? Okay, let's end the debate. Let's go out there and let's do the loop. Let's check it out. Let's see if it makes any difference at all. Let's try it in sport mode with no regen, or maybe not no regen, because I know it's going to automatically do some of it. But we're going to let it coast. And there's a couple little dips and valleys, no major hills, but enough to let you coast. So that's definitely a video I want to make.
When you're coasting, that's free energy. So here's what the bottom line is with regen. If it took X amount of energy to pull the truck up to a mile an hour, let's say 70 on the highway, and then you just let off the gas with regen on, and it recoups that energy to bring it back down, guess what? You have to burn it again to take it back up to 70 again. So I totally agree. And it's the exact same comp calculation that you go through in a gas car. If you will not hit your friction brakes to slow the car down, and slow down much slower up to a stoplight or a stop sign and ease into it pulling off, it's way more efficient. I really think that one pedal drive works around town pretty well, but on the highway, I don't use it at all. Now, in the mountains, it's a huge deal. It's 10% over a 10-mile run down a mountain. I gain 10% of my battery back going down a mountain.
I'm so used to the one pedal drive, and it's so much of a muscle memory for me that right now I'm in a Ford Explorer, and I've scared my wife a couple times because we're coming up on traffic and I let off the accelerator, and I'm used to the regen, and it's not there, and I have to catch myself and be like, oh my God, I have to hit the brake, and I've gotten so used to it that I think I would view one pedal the way you probably view tires. You're like, I want the look of the tire. I know I'm going to lose some. I really want to test it. I'm not convinced I will gain any range not using one pedal. But if I did, I would still probably use it because it's such a lifestyle thing for me now that I enjoy.
I can't deal with it. It's a absolute first world problem for me now. If I let off that gas pedal, the car better be stopping. In fact, these two Model S's that we built, the Model S's in the early days with the type of motor they had, when they're cold, they don't regen at all.
Oh, I didn't know
like
that.
When you let off, they don't regen. And I can be driving them 20, 30 miles, and then all of a sudden I have great regen. But the Tesla Model S in a 2014, when you pull up, if you drive a Lightning and you're listening, when you pull up to a stop sign, it kind of does that slow down, and it doesn't just stop. It has a little bit of creep, and then it stops. The tuning of the regen at a stop sign is phenomenal to me on the way the Lightning is. The Tesla Model S will kind of slow you down, and then it just never stops. You have to reach over and hit the brake pedal on a Model S, at least both the cars that I have. Now, the newer ones, the 16 and up with the refresh, and that's probably not the way and I know the Model 3 is not that way. It'll stop you too, but those older cars are different when I drive them, and I'm like, wait a minute, the regen's not working, and it's cold. And then if you just plug it in and have it preconditioned before I leave, the regen works right off. So that's an interesting concept for efficiency. Yeah. We did a couple of trips in one because we've been testing on this this 14 Model S. That's just an 85. We've put 2 different batteries in it to see how that works, and there's definitely a difference on range on precondition in that car. Yeah, it's affected even in the warm because the battery, everything's not warmed up, and I don't know why, but the lightning doesn't seem to affect. You're right, the charge curve is not affected nearly as much. I've never seen that truck go under 120 when I plug in, regardless of how cold it is.
The other interesting thing I noticed has to do with the way the roads are made. So there's kind of a common thing that I do where I am in the Bay Area as I drive further into the East Bay, and I go down a couple canyons, and then the way up is always way more inefficient than my way back. And there's some elevation change there, but it's very gradual. Going up the canyon, there's a lot of up and down and twisties and whatnot, and it's just fun to drive. But the gradient on the way down out here, what's called Mission Boulevard, it's a really long road, Mission Boulevard out here. It goes through a bunch of different cities, and it goes along the hill line of the East Bay. And so I'll drive up and down that road quite a bit. And it's got this regular, very slight grade that north to south is slightly declining and south to north is slightly inclining. And even that slight incline makes a big difference. And it's not as simple as elevation change either, because that same trip to Santa Anilla, one of the things that I logged down was the elevation. Santa Anilla is slightly lower elevation than Harris Ranch. So I'm going uphill. By the time I get there, I've gone uphill. But the way that those 2 sides of the roads are graded, and because of the prevailing winds go north to south, the combination of the 2, it's always less efficient going back north compared to going south. Even though going south, I'm actually increasing my elevation slightly. It's not a severe increase. It's, maybe like 100 feet or 150 feet or something. But even though I'm gaining elevation, it's far the way that the road is leveled and then the wind together make it so that I can get from my house down to Kettleman City on a full charge. And I can't even get from Harris Ranch, which is further up, Kettleman City than Harris Ranch. If I go Harris Ranch to my house, I cannot make it. It's less efficient, even though I'm technically losing elevation. It's very, but it's just the wind and the way that if the elevation change is subtle versus harsh, and if it's graded a certain way, if you gain that elevation slowly, but you lose it quickly, there's all these different factors that go into your range. Absolutely. So it's really, really hard to explain. And you almost have to know. I noticed this when we were talking about route planning before. And when I would use a better route planner doesn't think that I can make it from my house to Harris Ranch or Kettleman City. It kept trying to make me stop. But I know, because of the prevailing winds and because of the way that those roads are graded, I know I can make it. I've done it multiple times. I've never not been able to go from my house to Kettleman City. I'll get there with like 4% left, but I can absolutely make it to Harris Ranch or Kettleman City with 100% charge from my house. And a better route planner, Google, Apple Maps, none of them think I can. And so you really got to learn. You got to learn your truck, and you got to learn your environment with this range as well.
Time. And that's what, if you'll just watch those, like the Google EV routing, if it tells you to stop. And when you're learning, and as you get more comfortable with the vehicle, go further. We have a similar situation here. Some of these I find that in the hills, my truck does better than expected. On the flats, when it's pulling a pretty consistent, because I can slow down going up the hill and go speed up, build more of a fire, if you will, going down the hill where you're not burning energy, but you're gaining speed. Sometimes you can play that yo-yo game up and down hills and actually do better. We find that flat, like Kansas I-70 from Kansas City to Denver is just the worst, because it's always windy. Though that is kind of a test to any EV running at 75 miles an hour in a crosswind. Every time I go out there, I'm pushing 1.1 to 1.3 pulling a trailer. The trip where we're coming to see you in California this year will be the first long distance trip I've done with the truck without any trailers. And if I get 1.8 on that trip, I'm going to be ecstatic, assuming that I don't have my generator. We'll just throw that out there. And maybe Jesse's hydrogen. We got to put that in there too.
Get some hydrogen powered generator. That would be the ultimate.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There we go. Now we're talking. Now we'll get Jesse excited about my generator.
Yeah, that'll get him all in. He'll definitely be bought in. The other thing I noticed about long distance trips is if you've got wide open highway in front of you and you're just trying to hold a nice steady speed, then Blue Cruise is great. And even though I don't have it, I have the lane centering. It's great. It holds a nice steady speed, and I love it.
Yep.
If you have a lot of inconsistent traffic,
or even up and down slightly,
yeah, then it actually hurts your range, because what happens is the truck really overreacts to traffic in front of you. So if you have a lot of up and downs and the driver in front of you going up the hill is slowing down, your truck comes off of it, and it doesn't just feather lightly. It doesn't see far enough ahead, even if you set it for that far distance. It too aggressively brakes, and it too aggressively speeds back up again. So like that car that gets out of your way,
then it's just like going.
It's just going, even though there's a car not that much further ahead of it.
And it's got to slow on the brakes again. That's right.
And then you're exactly
right.
And
I noticed that too. I don't run the cruise when I care about efficiency and I'm pushing the limits of a tow trip. I get off the cruise. I try to let it coast down the hills. I tell you, watching that power meter on the dash has been my go-to, because I almost wish they would tell us there's tick marks or something on that power meter that show us you're getting this, you're getting this, you're getting this, if you keep this up, because I know about, a quarter of an inch of that blue power meter is getting me about 2.0. And that's just what I go by. Now, if you don't have yourself one, get yourself one. If you're listening, a little adapter, OBD2 link, BPeak, whatever, and the car scanner app, because in that car scanner app has the instantaneous. For some reason, they don't give us the instantaneous, and the instantaneous is nice. You don't use it long term, but to learn your truck and to learn what it's doing under certain throttle loads, and you'll be able to tell. Like there's times I think, oh, I'm doing really well, and I look down and getting 1.4 instantaneous. I'm like, wait a minute, and then just like you said, a slight grade down, and I'm really on the throttle, and I'm getting 2.2, and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't realize that. So you'll really start to learn how to manage that throttle to the instantaneous, because the truck doesn't show you. Even on my trip, that's a composite over how many miles you've driven. So if you're at the end of a 60-mile trip, you can't hardly get that thing to move unless you sit there and go to trip one and just reset. So grab yourself one of those cheap scanners, or $25 and a free car scanner app, and you'll be able to see some of those numbers, particularly the instant. I use the instant probably as much as battery temp when I'm on a trip, because I'm really watching up a hill, trying to maintain that number.
Yeah, I think those are
we were like a gas vehicle and we had 500-mile range. Nobody cares about this, right? We just drive it.
Yeah. If I've got that STX with 700 to 900 miles of range, it's I tell you what, man, the more different vehicles I drive around, keep in mind again, I'm driving, that city traffic, right? The commute traffic, the stop and go. I'm getting 18 miles a gallon in my Ford Explorer right now that I've got, and that's just abysmal.
Why not drive an F-150?
Yeah, honestly, I was getting better. I was getting, and I always get my EcoBoost and my other. What's the other boost? I get them confused.
Power Boost.
Power Boost. There's Power Boost.
Hybrid.
Yeah, and I think I had the Power. I think I keep thinking that the EcoBoost, because it says Eco, is the hybrid, but the Power Boost is the hybrid. Is that right?
Yeah, Power Boost is the one that has a generator between the engine and transmission.
Yeah, and so that thing was giving me great mileage, man.
Oh, they get 24 to 26 around town. They're really good around town, because your start and stops is what kills you on a gas car. That Power Boost gives you that half a mile of get you up to speed, and then the gas engine takes over. That's where it shines.
Yeah. So I was blown away, man. I was like, I'm getting incredible gas mileage in an F-150, which I'd rather be in than I am in this Explorer that I'm playing around with right now. And
if you're not an EV fan, and most of our audience is, that's an awesome, if you're not ready to jump in with both feet, but you still kind of want some pro power on board, and you want a little bit of the quiet pull out of my driveway experience, and really it runs pretty good. The EcoBoost and 10 speed is an awesome combo. That's a good way to start. But I just, once you go EV, it's really hard to get back in a gas car. I mean, you've been driving one for 2 weeks now almost, and you're done. You're ready for your black truck back.
Yeah, I don't even want to drive the thing. If like the truck, I would any excuse to drive. It's like a quiet place. It's like a calming place. I can listen to a podcast, listen to music.
It's comfortable.
It really is. And you get into those gas cars, man, and it's It's just, yeah, there's just nothing fun about driving them for me. Now people are screaming down the canyons and loving the sound and ripping it, and I
Well,
get it.
we had that conversation at lunch today with all of my guys at work because everybody, people are interested in an electric vehicle. They're just curious, the ones that are open-minded. And we talked about this. If I'm driving on a Friday night out to Sonic to get an ice cream cone with my wife, I'd much rather be driving a 68 Mustang convertible with a 6-speed manual in it. It's way more fun.
Yeah.
But if we're headed to Tulsa on a Saturday to go shopping, I don't want to take that. I want to take something that's an hour drive in comfort. And maybe that's the old age showing. But, I grew up with hot rods. We grew up 1,000 horsepower cars and all this stuff that you didn't even have the conversation about noise. But the older I get and the more comfort I want to have, this just ticks that box. I think we talked about it last week. You can't really grasp all EVs, not just this one. Even an older Model S Tesla is so much more comfortable than an older Ford Taurus. And right now you can buy a 2013 Model S Tesla and a Ford Taurus, not that much difference in price. They're both $8,000 to $12,000 for a higher mileage, decent car. And there's no difference. There's no comparison. The only thing I don't like about our Model S is the seat's a little hard, and you put a cushion in there and move on. But the Lightning is expensive and is as it should be. But Chris, you've driven some of these other trucks. Just pure comfort. Did that STX you had any comparison to this as far as that goes?
I will say no, but it was not bad.
Right.
The STX was not bad.
Exactly.
A big part of it is that low center of gravity, the equal weight across the entire platform. Whereas these trucks, I really noticed it when I had the 8-foot bed and the single cab, where you had nothing for 8 feet behind you, no weight at all. And then you've got the engine and me that are sitting in the front
railroad tracks.
Oh my God, that back tail end was just so awful.
Well, that's that solid rear axle and 2 leaf springs, which has been the staple for all trucks for 100 years.
But the STX, the STX rode nice. It was not lightning nice, not by any stretch. But it's but you can see.
No, but if you get in like a Cadillac Escalade,
yeah.
But jump in a Cadillac Escalade or a Lincoln Navigator that's on air, and they will ride like that too because they have an independent rear suspension. It's not quite as quiet, but it's very similar. I was in a Lincoln Nautilus recently that has, I think, their air suspension, and it was smooth over the bumps. But not a truck either. We're truck guys.
Yeah, and well, back in the day, back in the turn of the century, I had a '99 Ranger. It was a work truck, and my job gave it to me. So I had, and it was, they weren't as big as the Rangers are now, but they weren't as small as the Rangers were back in the 80s or anything. But the 99 Ranger was a decent truck. I was working on video games at the time. I was doing, maintenance for Dave & Buster's, the big restaurant that wasn't as big then, but it's huge now.
Here. Yep.
Yeah. And so I was a maintenance guy. I did all the IT stuff and the video game maintenance and the property maintenance. So I would regularly go to Home Depot, regularly take like 50-inch big screen TVs for the video games and take them into the shop to get them worked on. And that was what I needed. I needed bed space for that. So my weekend car was a 35th anniversary Camaro, LS1 engine, great manual speed, manual transmission, had the T-top that you could take off. That was just a fun car to drive, man. So much fun to rip that thing around. And then eventually, they got rid of the work trucks, and mine had a little bit different. Mine was had the little extension cab in the back with the fold down seats. It wasn't the super
bigger cab.
Yeah, but it was a great.
But did you know?
Truck.
I mean, we talked about the Ford. Did you know they made these little Rangers like you had in electric?
It's one of my. It's one of those things that I've told you because you had this, and Out of Spec just went and found one out. And I was telling Josh and Jesse like they Out of Spec found.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we talked about that
truck.
on the last.
And this one,
same truck. It's
this one was on there recently. I'm still thinking about buying it.
Yeah, I would love you to buy that thing. I'd love to see you rebuild it. I mean, does that say $2,500?
That's where it's at, but it has bad batteries, so you're going to spend $3,000 to $6,000 in batteries depending on what you decide on. And at that, it doesn't DC fast charge. So it's a local 60 to 100 mile range truck at home.
Yeah, I don't need it to fast charge. I would just want that thing I'd want to put a wrap on it. I'd want to get that Tesla battery in there, and you could have so much fun with it.
And
man.
I don't know on efficiency, those trucks probably are not super efficient, but I look at it this way. If I'm going to jump in something and go somewhere, I typically just going to get in the Lightning anyway. Already own it. We already have the investment. So that was the difficulty with having a second truck of something that's not either heavier for towing or serves a different purpose, because they both would serve the same purpose, running to Saturday to Ace Hardware. For me, a lot of my Saturdays are running in town, running for lunch, running to a hardware or a lumber yard, and I just needed something that served all the purposes. So that's kind of been the thing. And so for efficiency wise, all in all, I know that was our talk tonight about range and efficiency. The Lightning's not a very efficient vehicle. The Cybertruck gets a little bit better. The Rivian gets a little bit better. The Silverado gets a little bit worse. I don't think that's wind tunnel results. I think that's more driven by just mass and battery weight. I think those guys have been getting 1.7, 1.8 out of that truck. But the Lightning is really good. And like Patrick has talked about, his truck was getting 1.8 where his Lightning got 2.3. So if you do the math on that, and then you look at the charge curve between the two and the efficiency of the charging, in all reality, there's not a whole lot of difference. If you look at the Kyle Connors Race Across America as a prime example, and I think the Lightning really come in last there, but they really didn't. They ran it out of juice at the last, and I don't feel like the charge curve wasn't what it is now. I'd like for him to redo that now with the current charge curve of all the trucks. I think it'd be a different story. But we noticed how the Cybertruck was right there with the 4WT. I mean, it was really close.
Well, poor out of spec Dave, man. That guy is.
He's got like 4 times.
I know he did the Lightning and the Lucid, and I love that, man. I really wanted to get out of spec Dave to get on the show one day. A long time ago, I tried to message him and try to get him to come on, and I've never been able to do it. But he's one of my favorite guys to watch, and I felt bad for him. I really was rooting for him, especially when he was in that Lightning. And I think they just had a bad BMS situation with that, and
it wasn't the charge curve wasn't very good in that one. Now when they're pulling 180 and 180, 190, I think I've seen 193. This trip last weekend was interesting. Speaking of efficiency and charge curves, I have the new update. I saw 184. I've got a full side-by-side comparison in my video coming out. 184 from 28% to 80% took me right at 30 minutes. It was so fast. I felt like, man, and then the exact same charger 2 hours later, same day, same stall. The only thing I changed was from the first one was A to Z Typhoon charger over to the Ford Electron, which I'm going to put this out there, has zero to do with the charge speed. It was something I noted. I had an hour and 10 minutes from 10% to 90%, but the charge curve, and I'm going to plot it out, was not anything like the first curve. So on the same day, you can get different charge curves based on a whole lot of factors. So don't think that it's your truck, that it's the charger. It could be a lot of things. And now the truck was actually calling for 209 max charge EV speed on my car scanner app. So it was asking for whatever you wanted to give it. But for whatever reason, I was the only guy at the Tesla charger that day, middle of Kansas, and it still wasn't getting me the charge curve that I should have had.
Yeah, on the this is one of those videos. Brendan Flash, who recently got the Lightning, and when he went to go pick it up with his wife, they took their Model Y, and this was one of those cool videos. And I've been saying this forever. When Brandon had the Y and would do his videos, I would see his charging. I'd be like, hey man, the Lightning charges pretty much like the Y. Of course, it's different because the Lightning has a bigger pack,
bigger battery.
Bigger battery. The Y is way, way, way more efficient, right? So I'm not saying the two are in any way equal when it comes to that. I'm just talking pure, you're going to spend more money because the Lightning is going to take more kilowatts. But I'm just talking the ability, even though the Y has a higher peak charge, I'm just talking that charge curve, how it holds up there. If you're on a road trip together, the Y and the Lightning charge very closely. The Y is a little bit more, but not by much, just by a couple minutes. And with this new charge curve that Ford has done, if you're used to driving the Model Y, the Ford will, in terms of time and charging stops, you're going to put more kilowatt hours into the battery, but it's going to be, and you're going to spend more money to charge it because of its size. but it's going to give you a super comfortable, spacious ride, and you're not going to spend any more time at a charging stop really than you are with a Y. And he had this whole video where he basically came to that same conclusion. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's what I noticed, you know, and I was just comparing his,
and we don't even
how many
know the
miles.
software level of his truck. Was this the new update or not? I mean, it's hard to say.
I'm sure. Yeah, this is actually, I guess I'm not sure, because this was a 2022, and I keep taking for granted that, you know, my truck has some early access stuff. It was confusing for me, actually, because there was this announcement how like new charging curve for the Lightning, and I'm like, wait, another one? And I just forget sometimes that I have them. I've had mine since like
August
of last year.
I had it because about Thanksgiving because of FDRS, and we pushed it ourselves, which is something that I need to be cautious with when I say things like that, because everybody's going to think, well, how do I get it? Well, you have to spend a bunch of money and subscribe to a software, and then you can do it. But it's also a little dangerous. I mean, we've talked about that before, but Brandon's video is a perfect example of efficiency of the charge curve, efficiency of holding that battery charge longer. And you've got two completely polar and opposite scales of efficiency of vehicle running through the air. You know, the Lightning's about as bad as it gets. The Y is about as good as it gets. The Model 3, I think, is a little bit better, but not
Model
much.
3 is better. Yeah. The Model 3, it gets you probably an extra 40 or so miles. It's impressive, man. That Model 3, you know, I've seen that thing get 5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is nuts.
Ours here doesn't. She gets about, I'd have to do the math, about 230 watt hour per mile. I think that's about 4.0, 4.1. But her car will go to Tulsa and back, and I'll have more battery left than hers. And she's got the extended range, the long range, all-wheel drive, just very 82% battery degradation, you know, just not. So for efficiency, you know, and it's probably been supercharged this whole life. But, you know, last week we had on Drew, who shed 106,000 miles, and he was still at like 94, 95% degradation. You know, and that's where we're at 82 on this Model 3. So,
I mean, if it's me buying a Model 3, I'm going long range rear wheel drive, because I don't need the all wheel drive. I'm not in the snow. Yeah. I don't need the extra second of 0 to 60 time.
I probably would do a Model S long range rear wheel drive if I were you. I have that car here, by the way. That's a 13 with long range. It's got a 90 kilowatt pack in it. It should be 250 miles real range. Especially like you said, you don't need the all-wheel drive, but because have you been in a Model 3, driven one a lot? It's a tight little car for us.
Yeah, I physically can't. I would never be comfortable in a Model 3. Me too. EV Geek chiming in. I would never personally buy a Model 3 or a Model Y, and
me neither.
They're just not big or comfortable enough for me. I want the 240 volt output. I am going to be borrowing a Cybertruck Sunday into Monday. I'm going to get to play around with that. So Tesla had an event. Joe, who is he's the president of the Tesla Owners Club, San Joaquin Valley. They had their anniversary party recently, and they have a raffle. And one of the things that I got was a 24 hours with a Cybertruck. So Sunday, awesome. I'm gonna go pick up the Cybertruck on Sunday. I'm gonna drive it on Sunday. I'm gonna do
how many miles are they gonna let you put on it?
I think they say 200 miles. They want to keep you below 200 miles. I actually
do a little range testing with it.
Yeah, so I'm not going to do so much range testing. What I'm going to do with it is I was really impressed by the full self-driving when I got the new Model Y. And truth be told, I really wanted the new Model Y again, because I thought that would be more relevant to let my wife try out, because she's never going to buy the Cybertruck. But I wanted her to experience full self-driving. And so I went down to the Tesla factory, and I just talked to some of my contacts there. And I said, hey, I got this thing for 24 hours with a Cybertruck. Instead, can I take a new Y? I'd rather have a new Model Y for 24 hours and like let her experience full self-driving in it. But they don't have enough X's. And the outgoing Model Y, they're trying to move, and the new Model Y, they have so many test drives of them that they can't let it go for 24 hours. Yep. So I could have a new Model Y for a shorter period of time, like half a day, but I really want it I'm going to use it because there's our friends over at Chempower. Back when Chempower opened up their factory, They shout out in acknowledgement, Kyle Connor kind of made some introductions when I was at Act Expo last year and got me connected with Chempower. And they literally flew me out to their grand opening in North Carolina. I got to meet Brandon Flash out there in North Carolina and check out those guys at Alpatronic. But I got to see the entire opening and do a tour and see all the insides of how Chempower is built and how their chargers work. And so they are opening one of their first customers who bought a Chempower set out here in San Francisco. So I'm going to take, when I did that Model Y video, it was on a Sunday. It was a very basic drive, not a lot of traffic. So I'm going to go do that Chempower event on Monday in San Francisco. So I'm going to take in the Cybertruck. I'm going to take the Cybertruck from my house. I'm going to put the address in, and I'm going to see if it can full self-drive me through Bay Area traffic across the Bay Bridge into, right? And I thought that would be
I assume a dual motor.
I'm not sure if they'll give me the dual or the tri. I have to wait and see but I'm perfectly happy with a dual motor. I really just want the FSD to see how it does across the bridge, how it does through what's called the MacArthur Maze out here, see how it does in the stop and go traffic. I just really want to experience it from that level. And then I want to get my wife in it, and I want to have her experience full self-driving, like from our house to her work, and just see what that's like for,
your wife would drive an F-150 Lightning if the price was right.
Not a Cybertruck, but she's driven my Lightning and enjoys it. Yeah, she enjoys driving it.
And I'm just, because we've talked about that here. We both had Lightnings for a while, and we were perfectly content and would probably go back to that today. I just happened to be in this Mach-E for her cheap. Because I thought if we kept a Lightning and I bought a Cybertruck, just because, I'm not really wanting to get away from Ford, but I'd like to try one like what you're saying for a day, just see how I liked it. Because I know there's some huge differences. There's some guys that didn't like it, some guys that did like it. I want to see how it is. I know the back seat, people talk about if you're tall, it's a little harder to do, and the visibility, the blind spots are a little tougher. I want to hear some of that from you when you get back. That's going to be really great.
Yeah, I've gotten to spend some time in one, but I've never spent an entire day. I got to spend some time in F the Pump Wills when he got delivery. John from Tesla Owners Club Silicon Valley. That was actually the video that made my YouTube channel monetize, is because I got to drive his truck, and that video got 100,000 views. This was very early. Yeah, and very few people had it, and so I've gotten to spend some time in the Cybertruck a few times, and I've enjoyed it every time. But so it doesn't have.
Since we're on efficiency tonight, Chris, if you could pay attention to that, see what that truck kind of does compared to your Lightning, because you have a really good hold on what that Lightning will do. In your same trust. Let's see what that Cybertruck. I know it'll be in watt-hour per mile, but we can convert it.
Yeah, that's the one that I struggle with, is that conversion. I know from the experience I've had.
Calculator.
Yeah, I'll have to get that. I'll have to get those and notate those down. And yeah, we were just talking about the different Teslas. I'm not a Tesla hater, man. I love Tesla. I think they're a great company. Yeah. They're what made me fall in love with EVs. But like EV Geek is saying, like, they're just not built for me. And in his case, it sits too low. Now, Kyle Connor, for example, loves that. He wants to sit low. He talks all the time about the Y, how he doesn't like that it's on a little pedestal. Yeah. He wishes it was slammed to the ground.
My daughter's like that. She has a 3, and she's like 5'8", but she weighs 110 pounds, fits in the Model 3 perfect. She doesn't want a Y. She said it looks like a mom car. And I don't blame her. It's really the Model 3 is really their only true sedan. The other cars are more crossovery.
Yeah, and Josh is 6'5", 6'6" or something. Yeah. Joe Schultz, he's up there, 6'5", 6". You need the big trucks.
Cybertrucks or Model S's if they're car guys.
Yeah, and then for Cybertruck, it's a couple things. The frunk, I've fallen in love with the Ford frunk. I like that it's got power up there. I like that it's got all the space. And the backseat area it's big, it's spacious, but it's not as big as the Lightning. And then the seat, this, for those that don't know, I actually have you can't really see it, but this is a Cybertruck seat. And this curve,
don't you have like a Model 3 or Y seat at work?
I have a Model Y. Yeah, I have a Model Y. My office chair is a Model Y. Shout out to Tesla Tim.
Chris's are very politically correct, non-judgy. He's got a Ford hat, a Ford Lightning, a Model 3 seat, a Cybertruck seat. You'll just you'll try it all.
I love the technology, man. Like I think the VW Buzz is an awesome vehicle. I think I love these things, man. The Kia EV9. We got a Rivian R2 is on order for my wife. We're hoping that it stays at the price that it needs to stay at, and we're hoping that it lives up to everything that we're excited to see about it. But that's going to hopefully be my wife's car. Is that one? Is the Rivian R2? So we're
oh yeah. I was hoping you were not going to go Kia because I'm just not a fan. I don't like the way that they do things. I did have some news that I was going to share tonight that it wasn't really about our particular, our particular topic, but I had one of these on order. This is an Orbital Systems side by side, 200-mile range, like 2,500 pound towing capacity, and like the Cybertruck shock and awe value when you first see it, this thing really has a different look to it. It's very Mars rover. Of course, they have it set in an area that's simulating that, right? So I had this on order. I don't know if it'll play here. I had this thing on order. This so we don't. You guys are probably hearing that. Let's see if I can mute that. I had this thing on order. I had this thing on order for the last couple years, maybe the last year. I think it's fantastic. I wanted one of those. I'm driving a Can-Am Defender now. The problem I have with it is I didn't know if they were going to make it, just like we've been talking about this Scout. Are they actually going to build it? The Aptera, are they actually going to build it? Well, as it turns out, they are not they're not going to build it. I got my email. Is that me having the feedback?
No, it might be me. I'll try to mute myself.
No, you're good. I got an email from them this week. They've decided to not. They built their prototype. It's up and going, but they were trying to accumulate funding, kind of like Aptera has been doing, and they weren't able to do it. So I actually got an email from them saying that I'm going to get my refund back, my $100 deposit back, which I expected to be gone. If companies like this don't go under, they've spent all the money, but they saved enough to do it. So shout out to those guys at Orbital. If any of them's watching or whatever, I'd support you again. This is exactly what I want, because I can drive these can be street legal. I can drive it to work. I can drive it all around. Kansas has except for main highways, you can drive these anywhere anyway. I drive my Can-Am in Kansas all over, but I want to go electric because I tell you the main reason, just like on the trucks on the road, that quiet. We go to Colorado mountains and ride. I don't want to listen to the engine. I want to experience the environment, the nature, hear the rocks, hear the trees rustling. And so this was going to be a big one. And so they're not going to continue. It sounds like that they're going to stop producing these, and it's too bad because it's an absolute fantastic. It's got Pro Power on board, 240, kind of like the Ford. They don't call it that. It had so many things that was just really, really tripping my trigger when I ordered it.
Did they make any, but just never got around to yours, or did they never even?
No, they made a prototype.
Exist.
Yeah, they exist. They made a prototype, and they showed they had a Facebook page, and they showed. I actually had the Orbiter on order, which was the middle of the road one. I wanted cab heat and air at least. It was like $38,000 for this one, $24,000 for the open cab. Which, if you think about a 200-mile range open cab for $24,000, that's competing with Polaris, Honda, all of them. Of course, there was the Freedom Edition, which is their top of the line $40-some thousand one. But this $38,000 is
crazy though.
That's what a Defender costs new, or a new Polaris Ranger's $38,000 for a decked out, fully loaded one. So anyhow, that's some news that I got an email this week that's not going to happen now. So I guess on to bigger and better things for what orders we all have outstanding. I still actually have a Dodge Ram Chargers or Rev. I had the Rev on order, but that doesn't sound like that's going to happen anytime soon. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think the last thing I have for this week is a cool video that came across today. We had talked. I get my podcast confused now. I don't know if it was on our podcast or if it was on the Josh and Jesse one. I think it was the Josh and Jesse one. It had to be. We were talking about the Mark Rober video. I don't know if you saw that, where he's a famous YouTuber, and he was a NASA engineer, and he's the one that set up those boxes. He lives here in the Bay Area, and he would set up those boxes for people to steal, because Bay Area people break glass and steal boxes out of cars.
Yeah, I remember that.
It does the fart spray and it blows
I
glitter
used to watch
everywhere.
him a lot.
Yeah, and he got a lot of grief. And I really, truly, maybe this is just the fan in me not wanting to believe there was anything malicious behind it, and I don't personally think there was. He got a lot of grief because he set up this scenario with a guy that works for a LiDAR company, and showed how the LiDAR vehicle stopped for kids and stopped for a fake wall and stopped, when there was fog.
Yep.
But the fog wasn't really fog. It was a smoke machine, which is
saw
different.
Your video on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was that whole thing. And the Tesla just blew right through the wall. But the problem was that he was using autopilot, wasn't using FSD. And so, it's just been everywhere, right? It's been everywhere. And I've been curious, would it, it's camera based, would it make a difference whether it was autopilot or not? I know the lightning's going to blow right through whatever's in front of it, man. It's not stopping.
I've done it. I hit the road cone. I'll admit, a while back, I wasn't paying too close of attention, looked down for a second, and the next thing I know, I'm running over road cones. And we were on Blue Cruise. It doesn't care.
No, that's not what it's.
And guess what? This is a truck. You got to drive it.
Yeah, it's not designed for that. And so I was curious, like, hey, would full self-driving make a difference? And so there's a cool, and what I really like about this video too is that this is a small YouTuber, and he may not be small after this. You guys only got like 1,406 subscribers. So this is a super cool video here. Kyle Paul. Video's already got 35, probably 36,000. Look at this. I can see the numbers updating here. 4.9 thousand likes. Great video. This video is going to blow up for this guy. I bet this monetizes
35,000 views.
Yeah, in 5 hours. And when we're done here, I'll leave the link in the description for this video so people can click on it. For those that have lasted this long in the conversation, you have got to see this video. Super cool. It shows how technology is so software based and hardware based. I should take that back. It's both. It's a combination of the two. So he builds this wall kind of like what Mark Rober did, and he sets it up, and there it is, right? And now it did not stop at first. This is him physically stopping it. It's clear he can see on his screen there that it can't see the wall. Right. But now the thing is, he's using full self-driving 12 point something. And he's also in I think a 2022 Model Y. So he's using hardware 3. The current stuff is hardware 4. And it's version there. You can see the software version, version 12. The new software version for FSD is version 13 point something. And it's hardware 4. So
is that what's in the Cybertruck, the new version?
Within the Cybertruck, yes, exactly.
You
right.
Drive this through his wall and see how it does on Sunday.
I am not going to drive theirs through a wall, but I don't have to. I don't have to, because what this guy did is he tried multiple times, and there you can see here, it will, when you get close enough, it sees its own shadow. Is what happens here. So hardware 3, as you get closer and closer and closer, it will show on the screen. It will show the shadow, and it will pick it up. And as you get even closer, the camera right there on the video, you can see it sees the wall now because it sees its own shadow. So now I don't know if that's a limit of hardware 3. I don't know if that's a limit of full self-driving 12. Maybe it's both, right? Maybe the
interesting.
You need, but so then what's really cool here is towards the end, he's like, you know what, man, I've got a friend who has a Cybertruck. And the Cybertruck has hardware 4, and the Cybertruck has full self-driving 13. And so let's have my buddy with the Cybertruck show up. And spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the video yet. Let's get over here. He's going to come up on here, no hands, whatever. And the Cybertruck slows itself down, nice and gentle. It doesn't slam on the brakes, and it sees the wall. It sees the wall. This is encouraging. This is cool, right? This is hardware 4. This is full self-driving 13. This is, still not the final version of what Robotaxi will be. But here we are, right? This shows what Tesla does best. They iterate, they improve. This is the next generation of hardware. This is the next generation of software. And if this is what's in the Cybertruck, there's even something more advanced in the mule test trucks and in the engineering trucks today. And in the Cybertaxi, there's even better than what this guy has.
They've already been talking about level 5 software it's in testing. It's fully functioning right now that's just not released to everybody. So I think
Yeah.
we're going to
So
see it soon.
shout out Kyle Paul, man. Like taking the time
Yeah.
to build this. How many people can do that, right? And then taking the
That's
time
it.
to say, okay, I've got a 22. It's on an older version. It's got hardware 3. You know, how do I test this even more thoroughly? And he built this thing out of wood, so he wasn't going to drive through it. The other one was built out of styrofoam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and I, of course, so being a family guy, I love seeing him, his sons out there helping him build this thing. So
Really
so
cool.
yeah, I'll drop the link for that. It's a fun watch, and it's I was super happy because I was kind of down at first when as I'm watching the video, I'm like, oh man, like that's a big gap. Tesla needs to solve this. And then here comes the Cybertruck and hardware 4 and version 13 FSD, and it works. It works. And it's only going to get better from here, right? It's not the end of it. That's where it is today. So is it perfect? No. Is anybody going to come across a cartoon wall on their next trip down the freeway? No. But
you might come across a tire laying in the road, or you might a deer. You know, that's what in the Midwest here, we hit deer in total cars all the time. So when we get to the point where it can detect those deer coming up out of the ditch and be able to stop and see it early, you know, they have some night vision stuff already that you can add to these cars, see it on your screen. And you can actually, I've been told some of the systems will tie into that and it will detect those. That'll be a game changer.
Yeah, I think what I'd love to see, what would really impress me is, excuse me, is if sometime Tesla would come out and say, full self-driving is now ready. It can be eyes off. It can take you where you need to go. In fact, we're so confident that it will, that if you are in an accident and an at-fault, it's determined that it's an at-fault accident, and we will cover the cost. You are insured. Maybe that's got to be tied into Tesla insurance. Maybe it's one of those things where if you have Tesla insurance, there will be a zero deductible. We will waive your deductible if you are in a full self-driving accident that is the fault, because there's accidents that aren't your fault. You know, life happens around you, right? But if FSD made a mistake, we're so confident this is ready, and that we will waive your deductible and cover the cost of the entire accident. And we won't put any points on your record, and we won't, because, you know, insurance companies do that. One, you got to hit your deductible, and then they raise your rates because you've got, you know, points, whether it's a home insurance, whether it's car insurance.
You know, this sounds like a lawyer's dream to me, but I'm sitting here from a Blue Cruise standpoint guy, not a full self-drive guy, right?
But to me, that's the ultimate test, right? Is that if you're telling me that this thing is, because I've seen, you know, my buddy that works with me, Thaddeus, who has a Model Y, he's done the summons, the actual smart summons where it pulls it out of the parking lot. I've seen multiple videos where that thing cuts the corner and hits another car or hits the curb. And I'm sorry, if there's any risk of that, like that's me, that's my insurance. Like I can't, if that thing is not,
you were controlling the car regardless. You told it to do that, right?
Yep. And so, like, you know, you can't. So until the first step is improving it, and I love what I'm seeing so far. But never make a mistake that full self-driving, you are in control. It is, you know, your job to keep your eyes and your hands ready to react at any given time.
And these early days, you know, my Teslas, the 14 and 13, don't even have autopilot. The only camera on the car is the backup camera. They do have some sonars when you're backing up to stuff. Nothing in the front, nothing on the sides. You still have to drive the car. It has cruise control, but not adaptive. You know, I think the Blue Cruise stuff is a really great place to start in it. And I like the fact that they actually make you take control if you take your eyes off the road as much as we do, because it's not quite ready to be hands off or eyes off more for a length of time.
Yeah, it's a super cool way to go on a long road trip, or honestly even stop and go traffic, man. It would be, I've really, as I've gotten to experience Blue Cruise, and now I regret that I don't have it, you know, but I still use the adaptive cruise control, which makes a huge difference on the road trips I've been on. But Blue Cruise would be a game changer.
Now, you have lane centering? I think I've asked you this before.
I do. I have lane centering.
Yeah. So really, honestly though, Chris, between the two, I've run them both. And I've run hands-off lane centering. Should I say that out loud? I think most guys have tried that, but there's not a lot of difference. There's not a lot of difference. If you do lane centering and you let the truck kind of do it, or versus Blue Cruise, there is some difference in the new versions, but early on, I couldn't tell. And I like lane centering when it's doing its thing. So I wish Ford would just come out and say, okay, we're going to add, you know, like Chevy, there's a lot more roads and they do a lot more Super Cruise. The tech can't be that much different. I know they're pre-mapped roads on Blue Cruise versus not on lane centering. It's working off cameras. The difference that I see between the two between lane centering and Blue Cruise is those when the lines go away, like through an exit ramp, it'll kind of try to take the exit. So I'm ready. I know the truck. I've driven it so much now. I just keep my hand on the wheel, and when it tries to do that, I just kind of correct it a little bit. The problem that I have with lane centering is I don't like it to drive and me at the same time, and that's what it feels like. You know, I like Blue Cruise better because it's just. And I've said there's not much differences, and there's not, but you still have to drive the truck on either one. Even Blue Cruise, with the new adaptive cruise control, I had it go through a roundabout the other day. I was following a car, so the adaptive cruise control slowed me down, and the truck drove through the roundabout. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" But it was a Blue Cruise mapped roundabout. I didn't even think it would do that, and I was like, "Wait a minute!" And it accelerated out, and I had my hands right on the wheel, like, "There's no way this is going to happen." The only problem I had is coming out of the roundabout is it accelerated way too early, too fast. So it was like ripping out of that thing, but tremendously improved from the earlier versions. So yeah, shout out to Ford. The advancements in tech they're making, even not being Tesla a tech company, it's really good. So
yeah, it's purpose built for those highways where it is mapped, where it is a little bit more predictable. Things can happen at speed. And no matter how great the technology is, you got to be ready to react. And like we talked about with the cameras, I can see the brake lights coming way before it can. And there's plenty of videos out there where somebody blows a tire or a truck makes a hard turn and sideswipes you, and Blue Cruise can't defend against it. And
Blue Cruise can't help you in dust storms when you're pulling in Kansas and it's going 50 mile an hour. You got to drive. I mean,
yeah.
We'll get there, but.
For me, what's so impressive about that full self-driving is just how it just takes you. It literally blew me away when it took me back to the Tesla factory and parked itself at the supercharger, because I wasn't expecting it. Like, it came to a stop right in front of the superchargers, and I thought, okay, I started to wrap up my video. I started to go through my, hey, thanks for joining us, and then it starts to move, and I'm like, oh, I think it's going to park itself, and it literally pulls up, it identifies a spot, it backs itself up, and parks itself at a charger, and I'm like, that blew my mind right now, and it's
they've got to be getting close to unsupervised with that kind of tech.
Well, they do out here. There's a number of different Tesla locations. there's the Fremont factory, of course, but then right down from that is Cato Road, further down in Fremont, down 880. And then across the bridge in Palo Alto is their engineering. That's where they do a lot of their test mules. And so they're moving employees between these different buildings quite a bit. And they have full self-driving cars that are driving still supervised, but they're driving people between these factories as kind of a taxi service. There's still somebody in the seat as they're testing this stuff, and they did get from the Public Utilities Commission, they did just this past week get authorization to do a taxi service, the same permit from the state of California that Waymo got. So it's happening. It's definitely going to happen. And I'm sure they'll start off in a controlled area, and it's going to be impressive to see. And that's just where I think all the other companies other than BYD are miles away from where Tesla is. And that's part of the reason I want, like I say, I wish it was a Model Y, but I'm going to have my wife at least experience the Cybertruck, even though that's not the vehicle she would ever drive in. I want her and my kids to experience this technology that we probably won't have as a family for another 5+ years,
right.
But
make them give you a waiver in case somebody scratches or spray paints that thing. You don't get in trouble for it.
Yeah, it's funny because that is another reason I wish I had the Model Y. The Model Y is so ubiquitous, and there's so many of them. People are less likely to attack it. The Cybertruck, I'm most worried about the night that I have it, because it'll be parked out in front of the house. I don't have a garage big enough to fit the Cybertruck in, so I'll park it. I have cameras, I have all that kind of stuff, and I live in a decent neighborhood. But it's a greater than zero risk of somebody in this environment doing something to the Cybertruck. Now, once I'm around it, I'm not leaving it out of my sight. You know what I mean? It'll be with me and the family until I park it. And then the next morning, I'm going to drive it to the ChemPower event. And once I'm done with the ChemPower event, I'm going to drive it back to Tesla and exchange it back. So it's it's going to be with me at that. If I can make it through the first night, I will be fine. You know what I mean?
The fact that you're having to say that said there's something wrong with people. Come on, people, wake up.
Yeah.
It's a car. You don't have to abuse the guy who's driving it because he chose to drive something and then the world changed around him. Speaking of trucks, before we get off here, because we're right at time.
Yeah.
When you getting yours back? Have they said?
So yeah, so I messaged you earlier about this one. So I originally brought it in because I had some during the recent rainstorms, I had some water intrusion in the taillights, the light bar. And so I got that covered under warranty because my warranty is coming up. My factory warranty is coming up on 3 years here. And I do have the extended warranty, but the extended warranty explicitly excludes lights.
Yep.
I don't know why, but it does. It explicitly
batteries.
Yeah. Yep. So I was like, well, hey, the thing is with Ford is when you get a repair, they warranty it for 12 months, 12,000 miles. And I on average drive 10,000 miles a year. I'm just now at 30,000 miles and I'm coming up on 3 years. So 10,000 is my normal. And it's really less than that, except for I've done that trip to Vegas, Long Beach, San Diego. I'm going to do a trip to Arizona.
Really, honestly, a perfect lease customer. I hate to say that.
Yeah. I had never thought lease before, but the way things are now, I
know. How would we have known that? Lease was a cuss word three years ago.
It really was. And I think the thing is, being a family person, even though I try to treat the truck well, it's not my truck. I'm still caring for someone else's truck. And if any damage would happen, I'd have to bring it back and I have to pay for any kind of, they're going to nitpick that thing. And maybe I could buy it out or what. I'm not saying it's a smart financial move. And
no, but neither is buying an $80,000 truck either. We all know that. If you want to be more financially, go buy you a 92 Chevy pickup and just beat on it.
And I will say, in my circumstances, mine out the door was 40,000 because of all the things.
Yeah, you had a little different situation.
Yeah, I had California
incentives.
All in that case.
I had like 55 in my rebuilt title Lariat. At first, but I wanted the first one, no different than the guys that put 88,000 on those Lariats when they first come out. Mine was the first wrecked, rebuilt Copart truck. I didn't care. I held my bid card up at the auction until I owned it. So, yeah.
And that's cool when you get to do that too. And so yeah, that's what it went in for. But then I also had a couple odd sounds and I'm like, hey, while it's in here, very odd, very specific things. And I guess it's the good and the bad of the truck, right? The truck is so smooth and so quiet, and you get used to it after 3 years. You know exactly what it sounds like. And so what I discovered, and this is super random, because I talked about how it doesn't get cold here. Well, any morning that it was between 35 degrees and 42 degrees, if it was warmer than 42, if it was 44, 45, it didn't do this. But as it got into the low 40s, the high 30s, just at the point of acceleration, it made this creak sound. And the sound, it sounded a lot like old garage door springs. If you ever had a manual garage door, and as you're opening up those big, long garage door springs, and it makes that sound of an old,
have them.
Right? That's what happened every time I would accelerate for just about a second and a half. And I recorded it, and I sent one to you, and I sent one to my friends over at Ford, and I said, have any of your engineers ever heard anything like this? And the hard part is that you can't replicate it unless it's cold. So it has to sit at the dealer. And this past week, we had a couple days where it got down into the high, it got 38, 39 degrees. Finally, the tech could replicate the sound. And that's somewhere in that front. Again, they weren't specific with me, something in the front assembly. They called it the front wheel assembly. I know that's not a thing after talking to you. So
I mean, it's part of the area. So yeah.
So we'll see some part of that they found, and they're going to replace. And then the other part was there was a suspension squeak, and that squeak only happens between 25 and 35 miles an hour when going over like train tracks or, those little round circles that are in the road, those little, like, hey, you're about to take a corner, that kind of thing. And so that one I could replicate. There's a road right by the dealership, and I took the technician in it, and we went around the corner and we hit some of the bumps right between 25 and 35 miles an hour, and I could replicate the squeak. That turned out to be a shock absorber. They're going to replace the shock absorber. It doesn't sound, we'll have to talk offline about this. It doesn't sound like they're going to give me two. I don't know if that's a problem. It doesn't sound like they're going to.
It's not really a problem. The problem is every part wears. If you put one tire on a truck on the right of a new one, you get it in it. It's something's different. So you may feel over time. If you're going to keep your truck for 200,000 miles, I don't know what they're going to charge. We can talk about this more too. But anybody out there, if you're going to put things, I'm a tire freak, so I don't put one or two tires on a vehicle. I put four on.
So the warranty is going to cover the one the one shock absorber, but it
So are
doesn't
we
sound like they're
thinking next week you're going to get it? Is that what what
next
I'm hearing?
week. Yeah. The part's going to arrive. It's coming from Detroit. And even if I could convince them to do 2 shock absorbers, it sounds like they have to get this shock absorber from Detroit. So I'd be waiting for another whole week to get it. And it does only have 30,000 miles. And so I don't know. I don't know the right answer. But yeah, that'll sometime late next week. I'll get it back with hopefully all those things fixed, and then I've got a big road trip coming up. Big for me, not big for you or for Robert, who we'll talk to next week, who just did 5,000 miles.
Big. You're going to do what, 1,500 miles?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it, but yeah, it's from the Bay Area to Glendale, Arizona, the Grand Canyon back to the Bay Area, 1,500, 2,000 miles, something like that. Certainly the biggest I've done. I've done 1,000 miles 3 times, but I've never done.
I think you need to video this. Obviously, you probably are, but a standard range on a long road trip proves that it can be done. It's all about managing time, and we'll all be interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it's route planning too, and having 2 kids that are going to need to stop for the bathroom and need to stop for food. We're going to stop for breakfast like we normally do. Then we're going to stop again in Bakersfield, and then we're going to take and go to Needles, California. Yeah, it's just the point, where it kind of Bakersfield, you decide you're going to go to LA or you're going to go towards Vegas, which way you're going to go. So so yeah, it goes through the Mojave Desert and that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll stop there, and we're going to stop at Needles. And there's this hotel at Needles. There is literally an Electrify America in the parking lot of the hotel. Wow.
You don't hear that very much. Usually it's Tesla chargers in parking lots.
Yeah. So it's perfect. We're going to stay at that hotel, charge it up to 100%, which I normally, of course, wouldn't do. And then that's going to get me all the way to where the Airbnb is in Glendale. And then from there, we'll go to the Grand Canyon, from the Grand Canyon back to Needles, stay again at Needles, and then head back. And then the very next day, like the day after I get back, I go down to Southern California for not Electrify Expo, to ACT for ACT Expo, where I'll be with Josh and Jesse. And that's an industry kind of fleet trade show. And so I'll be spending that week in Anaheim. So I'll right back in the truck. I'll just enough time to shower, do my laundry. And I'm picking up Josh and Jesse. Josh will already be down there at Disneyland with his family. Jesse flies into John Wayne Airport, pick him up. We spend the week down there in Anaheim, and hoping to see our friends Patrick and Liv from Maki Vlog. They're right down in that area. Anyone else that's going to be at ACT Expo, we'd love to see it. Most people aren't going to be. It's really an industry fleet kind of thing. It's not a retail thing, but the the Tesla Semi will be there, a bunch of other cool industry stuff. I go there for work, honestly, trying to learn the business of FedEx and how the industry and regulations in California are going. It's as much work and education for me, but we always do videos as well. We did a bunch last year. That's the first time I got to meet Kyle Connor and Jordan and Francie, and we met up for dinner.
I hope we get to have some of these folks on sometime and talk. I know that's a pretty good segue for next week. We're going to have Robert on. He's a big Ford guy, and I'm hoping to hear his 5,000 mile road trip plus all his other, and if you're on Facebook, you've probably seen him post. So that's going to be next week. We should have Jace back next week to join us for that. And that's going to be it's going to be a good show. So if you really want to see something, here's something really good that's coming up next week at 7:00 on Thursday. So
yeah, should be a great show. We're going to try to get more and more of these great conversations going, and we'd love for you guys to chime in. EV Geek has been chiming in. We've had a couple others. We're going to get EV Geek on the show. I've talked to them a couple times and said we got to get you on. They have a great channel, lots of content. They have so much content.
Really, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you chiming in. And so, we love seeing you guys in the comments. We love that you guys are watching. The big group on X that watches us live, and then a lot of people that watch us recorded as well. So no matter when you're watching this, we appreciate it. And tune in. Yeah, I guess send us home there, Martin.
Yeah. So everybody catch Chris on Bow Family EV. You can catch me on YouTube on Martin Rebuilds. We're usually all over X and Facebook groups. So if you guys ever have a question, feel free to shoot us a message. We'll answer questions. I'm in the Midwest. Chris is on the West Coast. Jace is more towards the East. So we kind of cover the gamut of stuff. So yeah. Thanks everybody. And I appreciate everybody watching, and we will see you all next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Central.
See you guys.